Comics Plus, what is going on? Akasan here. We're about to watch the new rock stars talk about House of the Dragon. It was such a great show, such a great episode. Enjoying it a lot, and there were so many things that got cut out of the YouTube reaction. It's on my Patreon and everything, but I figured this would be the easiest way to point out little things that I also noticed, and as well as new rock stars. Pointing out things that I may have missed. So let's go ahead and take a look. Here we go.
Welcome back to New Rockstars. I'm Eric Boss, and this is a breakdown of the first episode of House of the Dragon, a Game of Thrones prequel series adapted from George R. R. Martin's Fire.
George R. R. Martin
actually started on this channel, writing all of and eventually hosting the Game of Thrones analyses. And look how young and innocent that widow boy walked.
Wow.
He had no idea what laid before him, and how a career in YouTube would plague him with social disorders. But hey, I'm still excited to return to Westeros, not just to list a random number of Easter eggs, but really to dig into the deeper thematic subtext, analyze the interesting cinematic details, and make that HBO flavored violence even sexier, and that HBO flavored sex even more violent.
He's morbing out
with narration from adult Rhaenyra Targaryen, who will be played by Emma Darcy in future episodes. She's recounting the Great Council of 101. The dynasty of Aegon the Conqueror went Aegon, then Aenys, then Maegor, and now Jaehaerys. Jaehaerys' first son Aemon had died 9 years prior, leaving behind Aemon's daughter Rhaenys, but she was the queen who never was, passed over for his second son Balon, who had just died of a burst appendix. Warring factions began to rally, so Jaehaerys gathered this council to decide his heir and prevent civil war. But a difference from the book here, it did not come down to Viserys and Rhaenys. Rhaenys made a claim, but was immediately discounted due to her being a woman. It really came down to Viserys and Rhaenys' son, Laenor Valyrian, whom we will meet later in this series.
Really?
But here they emphasize Rhaenys getting slighted to connect this history to the similar succession drama that goes down with Rhaenyra. This setting is Harrenhal. You remember that from season 2 of Game of Thrones. It's the largest structure in Westeros that was chosen to house these 1,000 lords. Notice how the Targaryens' hair blows in the wind, as this castle is in a ruined state, exposed to the elements. Why? Because a century earlier, Aegon's dragon Balerion torched this place to the ground. Really, the fact that Viserys was the final Targaryen prince to ride Balerion, who had died 7 years before this, was a major factor that led to him being chosen as Jaehaerys' heir. And now, with his hair blowing in this wind, he really does fit the bill of a dragon rider who torched places just like this. Also, a prince who uses conditioner. Maybe he was born with it. James. Rhaenyra's voiceover says,
in those days, House Targaryen stood at the height of its strength, with 10 adult dragons under its yoke.
Under its yoke? Yeah, right. Viserys reveals that the Targaryens' actual control of the dragons is an illusion. Also, yolk, as in that of an egg. An egg does become a key symbol later this episode. The scroll that Jaehaerys reads is stamped with the sigil of the Order of Maesters, a ring of chains. Notice how the Maesters in this series wear chains that are more varied than the chains worn by the Maesters in the Game of Thrones series, really because each link is meant to represent mastery of a completely different field, kind of like merit badges. Though I don't know if these Maesters really deserve one for OBGYNing. The opening title shows the Targaryen sigil of the 3 dragon heads, and music from returning Game of Thrones composer Ramin Djawadi. Yeah, you'll notice the end has that same bass string trimmer that Djawadi would use in the House Targaryen theme in Game of Thrones, right before a dragon would Dracarys. We get a classic Game of Thrones style animated game board opening. However, I do think we get a nod to that Game of Thrones game board hidden interestingly in this episode later on. Then we jump ahead about a decade later as Rhaenyra rides her gold-colored dragon Syrax through the clouds. Yes, it took multiple seasons of Game of Thrones to get to dragons, but this one starts right off with him. A way bigger budget's always a beautiful thing. Notice on the Red Keep, some construction scaffolding is visible. This castle was completed decades earlier, finished by Maegor the Cruel, who also ordered the construction of the Great Dragon Pit, which you can see in the background here.
That's what that is. Okay.
The ruins of this dragon pit were seen in Game of Thrones, where in season 7 Daenerys talked about how walking the dragons in this pit destroyed the Targaryens.
This place was the beginning of the end for my family.
We
weren't extraordinary without them. We were just like everyone else.
A reality that Rhaenyra admits using the same words at the end of this episode.
Without them, we're just like everyone else.
As Syrax lands, the Elder Dragon Keeper uses his staff to halt the younger one, and they speak in High Valyrian commands. Dohaeris, meaning, I think, to serve, as in Valar Dohaeris, but I think in this context, maybe it means obey. Then Umbas, not really sure about that one, maybe it means in line. Rybas, which means listen or hear, and then later, Nyot, which means forward. Rhaenyra's friend is Alicent Hightower, who says,
Syrax is growing quickly.
She'll soon be as large as Caraxes.
Caraxes.
Almost large enough to settle too.
Caraxes is Daemon's dragon, nicknamed
Right.
the Bloodworm for its extra long neck. You'll notice these dragons wear saddles, which makes sense for animals one would ride. Daenerys never used a saddle to ride Drogon in Game of Thrones, and when they asked how Daenerys could stay on this dragon, some people who worked on the show told my colleague Joanna Robinson over on the Ringerverse podcast that apparently it had to do with Drogon's spikes and the way a hat sits on a hook. I know.
Excuse me? Excuse me? Yeah. Wow.
By the way, it's important to be on
Joffrey, chill. You too, King Kong.
top of your mental health, which is why it's so frustrating when you can't find a therapist. If you think you might be feeling depressed, stressed, anxious, or overwhelmed, BetterHelp is here to help. This video is sponsored by BetterHelp. BetterHelp offers licensed therapists that only then Rhaenyra does mention a saddle for two in this episode, does end with a two-seated saddle, just on a different dragon, Caraxes, as Daemon and Miss Arya leave. But notice how we cut back to Syrax here and realize that only then did this dragon turn back into the pit. Syrax was watching these two girls for their whole conversation, as if not trusting Alicent. The character
okay, that's where Ned Stark was killed, right? I swear, I hope I was right about this one.
Remember that was Aegon's dragon, last ridden by Viserys several years prior. These girls stroll through the Red Keep courtyard. This looks like the same location.
Oh shit, was I wrong about that? I could have sworn that's where Ned Stark was beheaded, and Arya climbed up on the that thing, like the statue was gone. But maybe, damn, I thought it was. Maybe I was wrong. This definitely is from we see it in the season finale when it all comes crumbling down the world map.
Location Cersei Lannister would later convert to the map floor in the later seasons of Game of Thrones. Over all of this, Jawadi's main Game of Thrones melody plays because, you know, HBO really needs us to remember the good times. In Queen Emma's chamber, incense burns, and a maester writes a desk. This guy's likely working on those moon charts that Melos will later update the king about. A septa lights candles in front of wall art that depicts several characters apparently in an orgy. This chamber is covered in porny imagery, maybe to encourage fertility. Some nurseries have like plush toys. This one has hand job. Emma says,
"This discomfort is how we serve the realm."
I'd rather serve as a knight and ride to battle in glory.
While Rhaenyra is presented as a Daenerys figure, here she echoes Arya.
You will marry a High Lord and rule this castle.
No, that's not me.
Emma then says,
"The childbed is our battlefield."
An important foreshadowing line, because later director Miguel Sapochnik will intercut between the bloody fight in the tourney and the even bloodier scenes of the childbirth. Because whereas tourneys are pretend wars that often end in the night yielding, Emma didn't have that option. Her childbed was a literal battlefield where they tried to decide kings, and ultimately, like many battlefields, no one really walked away from it. On to the King's Small Council.
Well, I believe you might be looking up the wrong end.
I'm very curious what the whole egg thing is, like how they like put the like dragon eye or whatever, like when they go to the table. It looks like yolk or egg or something like that.
Yes, Viserys finishes a dirty joke. Maybe even the punchline to Tyrion's never-ended joke from Game of Thrones.
I once brought a jackass and a honeycomb into a brothel.
Silence! What happened next?
But if you look online, there are actually quite a few really great possible answers to that one. Notice how Viserys eats a boiled egg. Now, a dragon egg will become a major plot point with Daemon later on this season. But this episode also draws a parallel to Viserys' unborn child and an egg.
After this miserable pregnancy, I wouldn't be surprised if I hatched an actual dragon.
Now, this is a cruel parallel, but Viserys eats a boiled egg here, while his baby egg does not survive and ends up getting cooked. Viserys' small council includes his hand, Otto Hightower, Master of Laws, Lionel Strong, Grand Maester Melos, Master of Coin, Lyman Breezebury, and Master of Ships, Corlys Valyrian, Lord of Driftmark, his sigil the Seahorse. He's husband to Rhaenys. He and all the Valyrians have silver hair because the Valyrians are really kissing cousins to the Targaryens. Both Emma and Viserys smelled dragon on their daughter. I love this detail because it gives a new sensory weight to creatures that otherwise would just come off as VFX nothings. But like any riding animal, dragons would have a scent to them. I'm gonna guess it's smoky. Otto brushes off Corlys's warnings about Kragus the crab feeder in the Stepstones, and Otto tries to redirect to a lighter subject of the tourney, but since this tourney is in honor of Viserys' unborn son, the subject is actually even more serious because notice how Corlys refuses wine from Rhaenyra so that he can listen closely to the Melos' updates about the health and sex of that child. Later in the episode, you'll notice after Emma's death, Corlys pours wine, but isn't surprised when Otto brings up the succession matter. He's like, motherfucker, I want to be sober for this. So Harold Westerling takes Rhaenyra to the throne room.
Right.
We pass through the Red Keep's gates at first light.
Does my father know he's here?
And they're speaking Valyrian.
We just learned quite a bit about Prince Daemon, his reputation preceding him. Daemon is a massive celebrity, yet somehow he managed to sneak into the Red Keep with very few noticing. Master of Sneaks! This tells us that Daemon has some pretty tight connection with the City Watch, that Viserys has a blind spot for his brother, that Rhaenyra likes having secrets with her uncle, and that Daemon might know some hidden passageways around the castle that others don't. Maegor the Cruel actually had the builders of this castle killed to keep its secrets, but maybe Daemon has learned some of them. Daemon sits on the Iron Throne.
That's crazy.
Notice how the Iron Throne is a larger nest of swords than it was in Game of Thrones. It's now closer to the description in George R. R. Martin's text.
True,
It's supposed to be more
true.
of a
Yeah,
mountain of
exactly,
swords, but
yeah.
still to connect it with its look in Game of Thrones, they essentially just added a briar patch of swords surrounding the throne. But by designing it this way, you can see how Aegon recklessly just tossed more and more swords into that pile and just had Valyrian melt it with dragonfire, making this a bit of a historical deconstruction to that grand design of the Targaryen dynasty. It actually seems more like a hasty scramble, as this sloppy dynasty more truly was. George R. R. Martin's The Rogue Prince said of Daemon, "In his day, there was not a man so admired, so beloved, and so reviled in all of Westeros. He was made of light and darkness in equal parts. To some he was a hero, to others he was the blackest of villains." Similarly, notice how it takes us a moment to see Daemon in the light.
God, did you hear that?
As this uncle and niece speak in High Valyrian.
Kotiotarano sit isa.
The throne and the surrounding swords cast him
we're
into
back.
shadow, giving him a deceitful look about him. Also notice how he leans forward and to his right, unlike his brother who leans back and leans on the left armrest when he sits on the throne. Daemon seems to instinctively know how to sit on this throne without getting cut, because their ancestor Aegon the Conqueror designed it in such a way with exposed, still sharp swords that would make it really uncomfortable to sit in and make the Iron Throne not much of a desirable seat to want. Daemon gives his niece a necklace.
It's Valyrian steel,
Yes.
like Dark Sister.
Dark Sister is the name of Daemon's sword, first carried by Aegon's sister Visenya. Notice how, as he yanks that necklace back, he grips it in a fist, like a chain wrapped around knuckles as a kind of weapon. Valyrian steel is extremely rare, since the art of forging it was lost in the Doom of Valyria. So to use it for jewelry, therefore, just seems insane. But symbolically, it links these two in a kind of relationship, or relationship that will be a weapon wielded against many others in this series.
Be
Rhaenyra
careful.
and Alicent sit in the Godswood. You can see the red leaves of the weirwood tree and its face with the bleeding eyes and the white trunk behind them. The weirwood trees represent the old gods. These were carved by the children of the forest, and many of these were cut down by the first men, who believed that the children's green seers could use these trees' faces to spy on men. And the fact that Rhaenyra and Alicent have this little disagreement over the value of Rhaenyra's royal position in the presence of a weirwood tree is significant, as if the old gods are watching these two future queens begin to square off as friends. Alicent quizzes
Future
Rhaenyra about
queen.
Princess Nymeria, the namesake of Arya's direwolf, and
Yes.
the warrior queen who led the Rhoynar and conquered Dorne and took Mors Martell as her husband. Turns out Rhaenyra does know this history, but she tears the page out of the book, showing how she is unbound by historical precedent. But ironically, it is these kind of historical textbooks that bring Alicent in between Rhaenyra and her father Viserys. Viserys
boy.
is treated for a wound.
It's a small cut from sitting the throne. It's nothing.
So is this not grayscale? Some of you guys are telling me it's not grayscale. I thought it was. Or dragon scale or whatever that thing that the little kid had in Game of Thrones. Half her face and everything. And then later, Bruce Wayne ended up getting.
Otto tells Mellos to keep it quiet because getting cut from the swords of the Iron Throne is meant to be a bad omen for a ruler. As Daemon said earlier, you are all cursed with me. And notice this cut is on Viserys' lower left back, the side that Daemon leaned away from the Iron Throne when he sat on it. The Maester attendant says,
"It's a wound that refuses to heal, Grand Maester."
the unhealable wound is a Jungian archetype in fiction, a physical malady representing a spiritual curse that a character must bear. For Viserys, this unhealable wound is really a manifestation of the curse of his family's exploitation of dragon power and the folly of their dreams, which is really the deeper theme of this episode. And it tells Viserys that Rhaenyra declared the baby a girl.
She even named her
Oh, wow. So it's just an open sore, huh?
Visenya. She chose the dragon's egg for the cradle that she said reminded her of Vagar.
God be good. This family already has its Visenya.
Remember, Rhaenyra told others that she wanted the baby to be a son
Right,
for
but-
Viserys' sake. So
right.
we learn here that Rhaenyra actually lies, depending on who she is talking to. Now, Visenya was Aegon's sister wife, carrier of Dark Sister, rider of the dragon Vhagar. Vhagar, by the way, still alive, and it was Visenya who produced Maegor the Cruel. Both of these were really considered to be the unstable branch of Targaryens. So Viserys here is saying, we already had one Visenya in our history, but also Visenya's spirit lives on in Daemon. Viserys said he dreamed that the baby was a boy wearing Aegon's iron crown.
I heard the sound of thundering hooves, splintering shields and ringing swords. And I placed our son upon the Iron Throne. As the bells of the Grand Sept tolled, and all the dragons roared as one.
Dreams are incredibly important to the Targaryens.
Yes,
Not just
very much
Aegon's
so.
dream that Viserys reveals later. The Targaryens first came to Westeros from Valyria because of a dream. Daenys, the dreamer, dreamt that Valyria would be destroyed in an apocalyptic event.
And she was
the
right.
people of Valyria mocked her and the family. But her father, Aenar, believed her, and the family fled to Dragonstone. 12 years after that, dreams confirmed. Valyria was destroyed in an earthquake and volcano, leaving the Targaryens as really the only dragon riders left in the world. And the Targaryens walked away from that as a family obsessed with dreams and prophecy. A curse that will poison every.
So there you go. There now you have the Matt Smith he's interesting. He was great in The Crown, to be honest. He played amazing in The Crown. It just depends on what role he's doing. But there you go. That's what happened to Valyria.
Every generation of Targaryens after this. Daemon unleashes the city guard on King's Landing. These gold cloaks just cherry pick targets and butcher them.
Raper!
Now, we will have to censor this visually, but I'm pretty sure the guy they castrate lets out a nervous fart when they strip off his pants. I swear we did not edit the audio of that. Damon's helmet is designed
Bullshit!
to look like a
No
dragon.
way! No way, dude. No way, dude. No. I would have heard that, man. No way.
Dragon with its wings folded in. I'm pretty sure the guy they castrate lets out a nervous fart when they strip off his pants. I swear we did not edit the audio of that. Damon's helmet is designed to look like a dragon with its wings folded in, but this does not look like his dragon, Caraxes, which is red and has a long neck. Rather, this looks more like Balerion the Black Dread. So with his armor, Daemon is really trying to cast himself as an inevitable heir to Aegon's dynasty. The small council meets again, but this time with Daemon present, still smeared in blood. They mark their presence with balls on plates.
Right,
The set
this
decorator and
thing.
production designer came up with these as a way of punching in for work, but I like how this gives each member's place setting and intentionality to it. 4 members to Viserys' left, Corlys at the far end, furthest away, having to shout to be heard, and then in the hand of the king, Otto alone on Viserys' right. His casual whispers most effective. Now, in the brothel with Daemon and Mysaria, we start this scene with other women peeping in at them through the slots in the wall. This indicates that nothing Daemon does at these brothels is private, and for us, it connects the viewer with the voyeurs rather than with the participants, because that's what we are. We're pervy little voyeurs. Mysaria offers,
I could bring in another. Could even arrange one with Silveria.
Yikes. This tells us that Daemon has, in the past, requested a partner who looks like she's related to him. So that moment with Rhaenyra wasn't so pure, was it? As Rhaenyra enters
We
the
knew
king's
that.
booth at the
We
tourney,
knew.
Notice Master of Coin Lyman Beesbury has a massive coin pouch in his crotch, obviously to place bets, but you know, that's a bit of a thirsty way of showing what's important to you, Lyman. But interesting that Rhaenyra is late, and notice Corlys signals with his hand right as she sneaks behind Rhaenys, as if these two might have some kind of connection. Now, in the opening joust, Sir Criston Cole clashes with the Tarly Knight. All the major houses are represented here. You see a Baratheon stag, the Manderley eagle, the Stark direwolf, the Bolton flayed man,
Oh shit,
the
there
Tully
was a
fish,
Stark
the squire
there. Okay.
dressed with Lannister lions. On either side of the royal booth, notice are Valyrian seahorses, meaning Corlys's entourage has to sit outside the royal box. Poor guy, always getting bad seats. Daemon selects his opponent, Sir Gawain Hightower of Old Town, making a dig at Otto of House Hightower. This is his son. Worried for her brother, Alicent bites her thumb, and later we see her picking at it till it bleeds. An interesting motif with some of these characters, always having some bloody fingers. Corlys and Rhaenys comment,
I wonder if this is how we should celebrate the birth of our future king. With wanton violence.
It's been 70 years since King Maegor's end. These nights are as green as summer grass. None have known real war.
These violent delights intercut with the true battlefield of this episode.
Oh boy. Here we go.
Viserys said he must either sacrifice Emma to try to save the child or lose them both.
A technique is taught at the Citadel which involves cutting directly into the womb to free the infant.
To free the child? It's like saying the wretched womb is trapping the child. Medical malpractice. While Emma's screams initially bleed bleed over into the shouts of the tourney. When we cut back to her later, her screams are muted, while all we hear are the sounds of the fighting. It's like her whole identity is being muted and cruelly snuffed out. This brutal realism contrasts with Sapochnik's stylized shots of the joust.
So
using the
that
dividing
was
poles
rough,
and camera
man.
track line to follow
But that's
Daemon
Game of
along, his
Thrones.
back grinds along against it. I also appreciate the contrast between these two warriors. There's a lot of close-ups of the fine armor of Daemon and his
beautifully
horse,
done,
contrasting with the simpler and scuffed armor of Sir Criston. Ultimately, Daemon is brought down by his showboating. While Daemon was more focused on his ego and the crowd, Criston never took his eyes off the prince.
Yep.
Victorious, Criston removes his helmet.
Gods, he's Dornish.
Oh,
Another
boy.
change from George R. R. Martin's text. Originally, Sir Criston's a Stormlander, but this series makes him a Dornish, son of a steward of Lord Dondarrion, making the southern realm of Dorne even more important to the series. With its
That's
proximity,
good.
the Triarchy's advances in the Stepstones, and Rhaenyra's knowledge of Nymeria's marriage to Mors Martell of Dorne. I assume that's going to come up. Summoning some inner authority, Rhaenyra commands Syrax to ignite the funeral pyres.
Dracarys.
Actress Millie Alcock rolls that first R, unlike the way Daenerys would say it.
Dracarys.
Which makes sense. 200 years earlier, High Valyrian wouldn't have been as watered down. Otto gathers a small council to discuss Viserys' succession, but we now see Daemon watching from the shadows.
Daemon has ambition, yes, but not for the throne. He lacks the patience for it.
Yeah, that scene
Master
was really
speaks.
hard to watch.
This makes us wonder if every time Daemon was absent, he might have actually been listening from this hidden spot. Viserys snaps.
My wife and son are dead!
This was a good scene. I really liked it.
I will not
Sit here and suffer? Feast
Feast
under corpses!
Yeah, nice word choice there. Working in an
Yep.
allusion to a
Feast of Crows,
Otto
yep.
seals a message to send to Old Town, presumably to set some plans to wed his daughter Alicent to the king. He creepily instructs her to comfort the king in his chambers.
You might wear one of your mother's dresses.
Yeah.
Yikes, the
Yeah.
men of this world. Viserys toys with this carved model. This depicts Valyria, his ancestral home, meaning he must have recreated it from his dreams. With its multiple tiers and layers,
That's
it's all
wild.
part of the same base. Makes me wonder if these kinds of models could end up being part of that Game of Thrones opening tile game board. Was that all carved? by
Oh,
Lord
that would
Viserys'
be
set when we
wild.
train set? Now,
Yeah.
to me, the most interesting moment of the episode, Daemon's speech in the brothel is intercut with Otto reporting it back to the small
I
council.
like that.
The gods give just as the gods take away.
He toasted Prince Balon,
To the king's son.
styling him
Yeah, for a
the
day.
heir for
For
a
a
day.
day.
Now, the editing made it seem like we were going to cut back to Daemon for that last part, but we hear Otto say it. Why didn't they cut to Daemon for that? Well, notice how Daemon doesn't deny saying in the next scene, but he doesn't explicitly admit to it either.
The heir for a day.
We all grieve
Did
in
you
different
say it?
ways, brother. Your grace. He dumb motherfucker.
We must all mourn in our own way, Your Grace.
George R. R. Martin wrote Fire and Blood as an in-universe subjective historical text compiled by an archmaester from accounts from Septon Eustace,
Oh,
who is
so
biased
interesting.
because he doesn't approve of Rhaenyra, and accounts from a fool named Mushroom, who gives his own biased, salacious anecdotes. Like all of history, it's just based on what people say. We don't really know what the objective truth was. And I bring up this detail with Otto and Daemon because we don't know for sure if Daemon actually said those precise words of heir for a day in the brothel. But he may have said something similar, or he may have said something even worse. Maybe he just feels guilty for being in the brothel at all. And the Master of Sneaks knows that Otto had him followed and spied on, and nothing he says in this moment is going to calm his brother. Also, he's kind of pissed at his brother. Now, Viserys clutches his sword, Blackfire. This is a Valyrian steel sword of Aegon. Notice how its pommel has a 7-pointed star of the 7. Daemon says,
You're weak, Viserys.
Fucking idiot,
Council of
dude.
Leeches knows it.
Council of Leeches, a fitting term, as leeches were brought up as a possible remedy with the maesters earlier to treat Viserys' unhealable wound. Physical leeches on Viserys' wound from the throne, metaphorical leeches on the king's waning influence.
Yep.
And Viserys cuts himself again, this time his pinky finger on the armrest. Now it's interesting to note that both of his wounds are on his left side, the side of his body that Daemon sits at the small council table.
Why do you cut me so deep?
Viserys summons Rhaenyra to the skull of Balerion the Black Dread, and he tells her,
The idea that we control the dragons is an illusion. An illusion. They are a power man should never have trifled with. One that brought Valyria its doom.
I love it. Viserys is echoing one of my favorite quotes from Game of Thrones, spoken by Varys.
Power resides where men believe it resides. It's a trick,
An
a
illusion.
shadow on the wall.
Viserys says,
You are the very best of your mother.
and I like how this line plays over a shot of Alicent sewing Rhaenyra's dress on.
Oh, showing that,
Like a mother would,
yeah, like
as
a mother,
Alicent
yep,
slowly transitioning from Rhaenyra's best friend to her stepmother. Daemon introduces Mysaria to his dragon Caraxes. I love the breath from the dragon's mouth blows back Daemon's hair. It's just a nice practical interaction between the physical environment and the VFX, just to make this dragon more than a CGI effect. But Viserys dispels the narrative that Aegon conquered Westeros purely out of ambition. Really, Aegon was motivated by a dream.
And just as Daenerys foresaw the end of Valyria, Aegon foresaw the end of the world.
Cold winter.
Just to begin with a terrible winter. Gusting out of the distant north.
We know what that is.
I love that when Viserys mentions the North. Of course, that's when we
yes,
the Starks,
Stark.
The begrudging Rickon Stark, and of course, a reminder of the Stark words: "Winter is coming." Now, Viserys says that Aegon saw in his dream the threat that we would later identify as the White Walkers, and concluded that a Targaryen must sit on the Iron Throne to unite all of Westeros against this northern threat.
It did, kind of.
And yes, that is Aegon's Valyrian steel dagger, the same dagger that Arya Stark will use to slay the Night King, and the one that was given to the assassin to try to kill Bran Stark years earlier. This dagger is freaking cursed, and of course, it's going to play a very important role in episodes of this series as the Civil War unfolds. But it's just interesting to learn that Aegon was motivated by the same doom that the characters in Game of Thrones will face. However, his prophecy was flawed when you think about it. Targaryens like Dany and Jon certainly play an important role in defeating the White Walkers, but while Jon was king in the North, a Targaryen did not sit on the Iron Throne when that happened. Cersei was sitting on it. Really, it was Arya who dealt the killing blow, and the throne is just going to end up getting destroyed while Bran Stark gets named the king in the aftermath. But to me, this flawed
okay, to be fair, I'm sure down the line there are a lot of yes, this will be the way the TV show ends, unfortunately, right? To be fair, I mean, we don't know because the books never got finished. The books will never be finished, the way I'm looking at it. And now, George R. Similar to the Snyder Cut. I know people are gonna hate me saying this, but similar to the Snyder's Cut, now you have the advantage of hearing the results of what one version was like, so that if George R. R. Martin eventually does put out a final book, and we get a final story, then he can actually take into account and try to tie it in a lot better. So then you kind of have a retrospect that you can go by. So it kind of goes both ways. So but I'm sure down the line most people won't even consider the final season even like correct. Like I was even thinking down the line what they might do is once if the books ever get finished, then they can make an animated version. Either they do a CG movie or something like that, or like a TV version, an animated version, like a TV show series where they basically not redo, but essentially retell the story again. Or, you know what? And then I was going to say the original Game of Thrones actors could reprise their roles with their voices, right? Or, you know what? You never know. 10 years from now, they might actually redo it. They might actually redo kind of like a remake. They'll do a remake 10 years from now or something like that with all new actors. That'd be wild too, right? Man, we'll see.
Just another example of the curse of the Targaryens being their own dreams. I mean, lots of things brought down the Targaryens. Of course, their own dragons, each other, their diminishing shadows. But at the root of it all, I think their paranoia over their prophecies, the mistaken belief that they must be the heroes of the story, is what drove them mad. So now, in this series, we're going to get to see what happens when madmen convinced that their fire is what will keep us safe, compete to see who can burn everything down the fastest. This episode closes with a mirror of the Succession Council that opened the episode, but this time a supposed correction of that historical wrong that denied Rhaenys her claim. Now, a woman is named heir, breaking historical precedent in a significant way. But since this succession was born out of the Targaryen curse, like the Lords of Harrenhal, the only thing these heirs of the dragon will inherit will be ashes. You can follow me on TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter.
Okay. That was pretty good. Spider Sense is tingling, man. Pretty damn good. I thought it had its moments for sure. And I think we learned a few new things. Yeah, it was always about the Valyrian stuff and Harrenhal. And there was one question I had, but we'll just search for it on Twitch about the place that Arya and Tywin. I believe that's Harrenhal as well. I could be wrong, but I believe they were chilling in Harrenhal. And then where the Blackwater area, where all the like grayscale people are just roaming around, I believe that is Valyria, but I could be wrong. So, yeah. Anyways, little things like that. I love this video. It was good to learn some new stuff. Red Red Nation, stand up, speak up. How are you liking House of the Dragon so far? It's good to be back in Westeros for sure. We'll talk to you on the next one. We're out. Peace.